Hey everybody, today we're going to continue with some Rhino training. So let's jump into Rhino. Today we're going to cover some one rail sweeps as well as a little bit of an array and a little bit of how to project curves and maybe even a fillet. So as you can see, I've just got a simple rim. In our last tutorial we went over how to revolve this rim, and I added in a center piece here, and I just did that with a simple extrude of a circle, and then I filleted the edges on both sides, and I've got that right in the center of my wheel or my rim. So what we're going to do is we're going to create some spokes that are going to go sort of like 5-star mag wheels, and see how we can create those with doing a one sweep rail. So the first thing we're going to do is go into a top viewport, and for your rail you need first of all your shape that the profile or the shape of the rail is going to take, and then you also need a path that this profile is going to extrude along. So your path can be curved, it can be twisted, so that's the beauty of using these sweeps. You're not restricted in just one straight extrusion. You can do curves, extrusions, and things like that. So we're going to start out with just a simple ellipse, and I'm going to go from the center here, hold shift down to restrict that second input in that one axis, click, and then I'm just going to make this wide enough just so it doesn't go past the boundaries of my fillet here. I'm just going to go right inside that fillet to right there. And that curve is going to be inside, right in the center here, since it's in the center of my grid. So I'm going to move that up. Again, by holding shift down, you can restrict that so that it moves straight up in one axis. And doesn't matter how much you move it up, just as long as it's up above this surface. And the next thing I want to do is make a copy of this, and you can make copies in real time in the viewport by holding down Control and Alt. So that makes a copy. So again, if I select the object, if I move it around, you can see it's going to move in the X and Y axis. But if I select it and hold Control down, that restricts that movement just in the Z axis in this perspective viewport. Used in conjunction with the Alt key, that gives you a copy. So if I just wanted to make a copy in the X and Y axis, I could select it, move it, and hold the Alt down after I move it, and you see you get the little plus symbol that gives you the copy. Okay. So we're going to scale this one up a little bit because I want the size of my spoke to kind of increase as it goes out toward the rim. So I'm going to go back to a top viewport, and I'm going to use the scale tool to scale this ellipse up just a little bit. So I'm going to go transform, scale, and this is going to be a 2D scale. Since I only want to scale this in the X and the Y axis, I don't want to scale it up in the Z axis. So the origin point is going to be in the center of that ellipse, and then my scale factor, I'm just going to pull that out when I get out here to the side, click anywhere, and then I can pull that out. You can also go to any viewport right in the middle of your command, and which is kind of unique to Rhino as well. A lot of software packages won't allow you to change viewports right in the middle of a command. So as you can see here in this front viewport, as I scale my ellipse up, I can look in this front viewport and make sure that I'm still in the boundaries of this area right here. I don't want to get outside the boundaries of this because I want this spoke to fit flush against this surface here. So I'm going to go in and scale up just about right there. So I've got my two shapes for my sweep, and now I need a path that these two shapes are going to sweep along. So for that, I'm going to go into a front viewport. I'm going to create a control point curve just below the surface of this centerpiece, and I'm going to give it just a little bit of a curve. And I can go in and turn on the control points and adjust that curve as I see fit. Just give it a little bit of a curve and a bulge there. Alright, so I have my two shapes and my path. So first thing I'm going to do before I actually create this sweep is I want my surface to actually connect with this surface when I create my sweep. And a good way to do that is I can project these curves onto the surface and then use those curves that are created on the curvature of this surface as my shapes. And I'm going to do the same thing for the curve right here at the top. I'm going to project this curve onto the surface and then use that as my curve for my sweep. Alright, first I'm going to go to curve from objects, project. So it asks me to select the curves and points to project. I'm going to select this curve, hit and right click to accept that, and then I'm going to select this surface to project upon, right click to select that. So now you can see this curve has just been projected onto this surface, so it follows the curvature of this surface on the inside of that rim. I'm going to do the same thing for this centerpiece here. So I'm going to right click to invoke that command again, select curves and points to project, select the curve, right click to accept, and then select this surface, right click to accept, and there you can see it's projected this curve onto this surface, and it's conformed to the curvature of this surface. So actually these two curves and this control point curve are going to be my sweep curves. So I'm going to go to Surface, Sweep One Rail, select this control point curve as my rail, and then select cross section curves. Going to be this one and this one, enter, and it asked me to adjust the curve seams, and it's just showing me where the seam of my surface is going to be. So it's going to wrap a surface around and come back and meet in this area right here. So if you say that's okay, I'll right click, accept it, and it gives me some style options here. So if your sweep doesn't quite look like you want it to, if it's not fitting just right across the curves, you can go in and make some adjustments here on how it moves in and out of those curves along that rail. So for now this is going to be okay. I'll accept the freeform style, hit OK, and there is my spoke. Alright, so now I can take and array this around in a right viewport. So I'm going to select that surface, transform, array, polar, make sure my snap is turned on and select the center of this grid. Number of items, I'm going to say 5. Angle to fill, or for first reference point, accept that. Second reference point, accept that. And there it is. So there's my 5-star mag wheel. Now, if I wanted to go in and start blending these surfaces together, then I can do some chamfers, but I first need to do a boolean to make this all one surface, one continuous surface. So I can go in solid union and select all these parts. And now this is one piece, it's one surface, or one solid object. So now that it's a solid object, I can go in and make adjustments and start chamfering or filleting these edges here. So for example, I can go in and say fillet surfaces, select this surface and this surface, and there you can see it creates a fillet between those two surfaces. So I could do that all the way around and get a nice smooth transition between these. Or I could also cut this back and do a blend between those two surfaces, which would give us more of a smoother transition. Or I could turn up my fillet radius on this. So there's a couple of other little tricks you can do here to make this look a little more realistic. But for the most part, you kind of get the idea. And hope you've enjoyed this. Come back and we'll learn more about Rhino.